The first crack of summer thundered through the neighborhood as Marcus Delgado tested the pH levels of his newly installed backyard pool. 3 months of overtime shifts at the hospital, countless YouTube tutorials on DIY installation, and every penny of his tax return had culminated in this 16 by 24 rectangle of chlorinated bliss. His 7-year-old daughter, Sophie, splashed happily in the shallow end, her laughter a perfect counterpoint to the ambient sounds of suburban tranquility. "Daddy, watch this," Sophie called, performing what she considered an Olympic-worthy cannonball that displaced approximately 3 inches of water. Marcus applauded with the enthusiasm only a proud father could muster. 10 out of 10, kiddo. You're going to be ready for the Olympics by next weekend. Their Saturday afternoon paradise was precisely 37 minutes old when the first sign of trouble appeared at the fence line. A blonde bob haircut rose slowly into view, followed by narrowed eyes that surveyed Marcus's backyard with the intensity of a property assessor on a power trip. "Excuse me," the woman called out, her voice carrying the distinctive tone of someone who had spoken to many managers in her lifetime. "Excuse me, I need to talk to you about this structure." Marcus sighed, setting down his pool testing kit. He'd been expecting this. Barbara Whitfield from 224 Maple Avenue had a reputation in the Sunshine Acres subdivision. Her age-old complaint record was the stuff of neighborhood legend. Though they'd never directly interacted, Marcus had heard the stories at community barbecues, the infamous garden gnome incident of 2023, the Great Christmas Light debacle, and most recently the bird feeder bylaws battle that had reduced the retired accountant next door to tears. "Good afternoon," Marcus called back, approaching the fence with what he hoped was a neighborly smile. "I'm Marcus. I don't think we formally met." "Barbara Whitfield, Sunshine Acres HOA Compliance Committee," she replied without returning his smile. She wore designer sunglasses perched on her head and a polo shirt with the HOA logo embroidered on the breast pocket. "That pool doesn't appear to be in compliance with our neighborhood guidelines." Marcus maintained his smile, though it required noticeably more effort. "Actually, it is. I submitted all the paperwork 3 months ago and received approval before starting installation. I have copies if you'd like to see them." Barbara's expression suggested she would rather eat the paperwork than acknowledge its existence. "Well, there must have been a mistake. That's clearly over the size limit for recreational installations, and the noise level is disruptive." The noise in question was Sophie's occasional delighted giggles as she practiced floating on her back. "The dimensions are exactly as approved in the plans," Marcus explained patiently, his years of dealing with difficult patients at the ER proving unexpectedly useful. "And as for noise, the HOA bylaws don't restrict reasonable recreational sounds before 9 p.m. Barbara's eyes narrowed further, achieving a squint that seemed physically impossible without causing strain. "I'm going to need you to drain that immediately. There's obviously been a clerical error, and until it's resolved, that pool is unauthorized." Marcus felt his daughter swim up beside him in the pool, suddenly quiet as she sensed the tension. "I'm sorry if that's not going to happen," Marcus replied firmly. "The approval is valid. I'm happy to send you a copy of the documentation, but we're not draining anything." Barbara's face flushed red with a shade of indignation that Marcus, even with his medical background, had rarely observed in nature. "You people always think the rules don't apply to you," she hissed, her hand gripping the fence so tightly her knuckles whitened. "This isn't over. Not by a long shot." As she stormed away, Marcus turned to his wide-eyed daughter. "Who was that, Daddy?" Sophie asked. Marcus sighed, helping her adjust her floaties. "Just someone who's having a bad day, sweetie. Nothing for you to worry about." But as he watched Barbara march back to her house, smartphone already pressed to her ear, Marcus knew their perfect pool day was just the calm before a very different kind of storm. Marcus had almost convinced himself that the encounter with Barbara was nothing more than an unpleasant blip in an otherwise perfect weekend. Sunday morning arrived with cloudless skies and a gentle breeze, ideal pool weather. He'd invited a few colleagues from the hospital and their families for an impromptu barbecue, partly to celebrate the pool and partly to establish normalcy after yesterday's confrontation. By 2 o'clock, the backyard was filled with the sounds of splashing children, laughing adults, and burgers sizzling on the grill. Marcus's coworker Janelle was regaling the group with a story about an emergency room mishap involving a patient with an improbable excuse for why he had a television remote lodged in an uncomfortable place. "So then he says, 'Doc, I was just changing the channel when—'" The punchline was interrupted by the unmistakable sound of an official vehicle pulling up outside, followed by a car door slamming with unnecessary force. "Is that a county truck?" asked Ryan, another ER nurse, peering over the fence. Marcus felt a knot forming in his stomach. Before he could investigate, the side gate to his yard swung open with such violence that it bounced against the fence. Barbara Whitfield strode in like a general inspecting enemy territory, followed by a visibly uncomfortable middle-aged man in a county utility uniform who seemed to be questioning his career choices. "This is it, Dennis," Barbara announced triumphantly, pointing at the pool as if she discovered evidence of an international conspiracy. "Just as I reported. An unauthorized water feature without proper permits or safety measures. The county worker." Dennis apparently cleared his throat awkwardly. "Ma'am, I explained in the truck that Sunday isn't normally when we handle non-emergency." "This is an emergency," Barbara cut him off. "We have children at risk, potential water table contamination, and flagrant disregard for county ordinances." The backyard had fallen silent except for the quiet bubbling of the forgotten burgers now charring on the grill. The children had stopped splashing, sensing the adult tension. Sophie clung to the pool edge, her eyes wide with concern. Marcus handed his spatula to Janelle and approached the unwelcome visitors, maintaining a deliberately calm demeanor despite the intrusion. "Excuse me, but you can't just walk into my private property without permission." Barbara sniffed dismissively. "I brought Dennis from County Water and Utilities to shut this down. You were warned yesterday." Dennis looked increasingly uncomfortable. "Actually, I'm just here to check if there's a potential issue with—" "There's no issue," Marcus interjected firmly but politely. He turned to address Dennis directly. "I have all the necessary permits and approvals. The installation was done according to county code with inspections at every required stage." He gestured toward his house. "Would you like to see the documentation?" Dennis nodded, clearly relieved at the prospect of resolving this through paperwork rather than confrontation. "This is ridiculous," Barbara sputtered as Marcus headed toward the house. "Dennis, you need to shut off their water immediately. I'm the HOA compliance chair." One of Marcus's guests, a silver-haired woman named Eleanor, who had been quietly observing from a lounge chair, suddenly spoke up. "Actually, Barbara, you're not." The entire backyard seemed to freeze, including Barbara, whose head swiveled toward Eleanor with mechanical precision. "Eleanor," Barbara acknowledged coldly, "this doesn't concern you." "I think it does," Eleanor replied, rising from her chair with the dignified air of someone who had just been waiting for this moment. "As the actual HOA president, I find it concerning that you're representing yourself as the compliance chair, especially since that committee was dissolved last month after the board vote." A ripple of whispers moved through the assembled guests. Marcus paused his trek to the house, sensing a shift in the backyard dynamics. Barbara's face contorted through several expressions in rapid succession: shock, anger, and finally, a forced smile. "There seems to be a misunderstanding. I'm acting in my capacity as a concerned resident. This pool represents a clear violation." "The pool has all necessary approvals," Eleanor interrupted smoothly. "I signed off on it myself after Marcus presented the most meticulously prepared application I've seen in 15 years on the board." Dennis, the utility worker, began edging toward the gate. "It sounds like this is an HOA matter rather than a county issue. If there are approved permits, then I don't need tow. Don't you dare leave." Barbara's voice rose to a pitch that caused nearby birds to take flight. Her carefully maintained composure cracked completely as she rounded on Dennis. "I didn't spend my entire Saturday calling every county department to get someone out here just to have you walk away." Marcus returned with a folder containing his permits and approvals. "Here's all the documentation if you still need to see it." Dennis gave the papers a cursory glance, nodded, and handed them back. "Everything appears to be in order, sir. Sorry for the interruption of your gathering." As Dennis made his escape through the gate, Barbara stood rooted in place, her breathing growing more labored with each second. The barbecue guests watched in uncomfortable silence, nobody quite sure what would happen next. "This isn't over," Barbara finally hissed, her gaze sweeping across the yard before landing on Marcus. "You think you've won because you have Eleanor in your pocket? There are other authorities, higher authorities." With that cryptic threat, she stormed out, slamming the gate behind her with such force that a decorative birdhouse fell from the nearby fence post. After a moment of stunned silence, Chanel spoke up from beside the grill. "So, who wants their burger well done?" The tension broke as laughter rippled through the gathering. Marcus exhaled slowly, turning to Eleanor with gratitude. "Thank you for stepping in." Eleanor waved her hand dismissively. "Barbara's been on a power trip since her term as social committee chair ended. She's harmless, really, just dramatic." She patted Marcus on the arm reassuringly. "Don't worry about her. What's the worst she could do?" As the party resumed its festive atmosphere, Marcus couldn't help but glance occasionally toward Barbara's house, visible just beyond the fence line. Something told him they hadn't seen the last of Hurricane Barbara. Not by a long shot. The relative peace that followed Sunday's confrontation lasted precisely 43 hours. Marcus was working the night shift at the hospital when his phone buzzed with a text from his elderly neighbor, Mr. Fernandez. "Someone in your backyard with flashlight. Called security patrol." Marcus's heart raced as he thought of Sophie, asleep at home with the teenage daughter of his colleague as a babysitter. He immediately called home, relieved when Zoe, the sitter, answered on the second ring. "Everything's fine, Mr. Delgado," Zoe assured him, though her voice carried a note of confusion. "Sophie's asleep, but there's some lady outside with a flashlight looking at your pool. The security guy just pulled up too." "Stay inside with the doors locked," Marcus instructed firmly. "I'm calling a replacement and coming home." 30 minutes later, Marcus pulled into his driveway to find the neighborhood security patrol car still parked outside. As he hurried toward the backyard gate, he was met by a uniformed security guard escorting none other than Barbara Whitfield. Even in the dim glow of the security flashlight, Marcus could see that Barbara was dressed in what appeared to be tactical gear. Cargo pants tucked into rubber boots, a dark windbreaker, and inexplicably, what looked like a mining headlamp strapped to her forehead. "Sir, I found this woman in your backyard taking water samples from your pool," the security guard explained, his expression suggesting this wasn't covered in his minimum wage job description. Barbara jerked away from the guard's light touch on her elbow. "I don't need to be manhandled. I'm conducting a legitimate environmental investigation." At 11:30 at night, in my locked backyard, Marcus struggled to keep his voice level, aware that Sophie might wake up. "That's called trespassing, Barbara. The health and safety of this community doesn't keep business hours," Barbara retorted, brandishing a small vial of water. "I've been researching pool regulations extensively, and I have reason to believe your chlorine levels exceed legal limits and are leaching into the groundwater." The security guard, his name tag read Miguel, gave Marcus an apologetic look. "I've explained that she needs permission to be on your property, but she insists this is some kind of environmental emergency." "It absolutely is," Barbara declared with the confidence of someone who had spent several hours on questionable websites. "Excess pool chemicals have been linked to neighborhood cancer clusters and amphibian mutations." Marcus took a deep breath. "Miguel, thank you for responding. I'd like to formally report her for trespassing." Barbara's headlamp bobbed indignantly as she shook her head. "You can't report me for protecting the community. I have documentation." She fumbled with a folder that appeared to contain several dozen printed pages of internet articles, their headlines visible even in the dim light. "The truth about pool chemicals, they don't and you to know, and are your neighbors poisoning your soil." "Ma'am, please lower your voice," Miguel requested tiredly. "There are sleeping families. TDHYLO thank me when they don't grow extra limbs." Barbara's voice echoed through the quiet neighborhood, triggering a chorus of dogs barking in response. A light came on in Marcus's house, and he saw Sophie's small face appear at her bedroom window. His patience evaporated. "That's enough," he said firmly. "Miguel, please escort her off my property. Barbara, if you come back here uninvited again, I will file for a restraining order." "You can't silence the truth," Barbara declared, clutching her water sample vial protectively against her chest as Miguel gently but firmly guided her toward the street. "I'm taking this to be tested at a real laboratory." As they reached the sidewalk, Barbara jerked away from Miguel and stormed toward her house, her headlamp beam bouncing erratically with each indignant step. Miguel turned to Marcus with a sigh. "Sir, would you like to file a formal report? This would be the third complaint against Mrs. Whitfield this month." "Third?" Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Yes, sir. Last week she was caught measuring the Johnsons' front yard hedges at 6 a.m., and before that, she was photographing the Rivera family's garbage bins because she claimed they were being left out 10 hours longer than permitted." Marcus rubbed his temples. "Yes, please file the report. I need to document this in case her behavior escalates further." After completing the paperwork and checking on Sophie, who thankfully had fallen back asleep, Marcus sat on his back porch staring at the pool. The water gleamed peacefully under the moonlight, betraying no hint of the chaos it had somehow triggered. His phone buzzed with a text from Eleanor, the HOA president. "Just heard about Barbara's nighttime raid. This is beyond acceptable. HOA emergency meeting tomorrow, 7 p.m. We'll put a stop to this." Marcus was about to reply when he noticed something floating in the deep end of his pool. Grabbing the net, he fished out what appeared to be a small electronic device with a blinking red light. It looked like some kind of water testing monitor. Apparently, Barbara had managed to toss it in before being caught by security. He was examining the device when his phone buzzed again with another text, this time from an unknown number. "I have the water evidence. Your pool days are numbered. The County Environmental Protection Office opens at 8 a.m. sharp tomorrow. Hope you enjoyed your toxic chemical bath while it lasted." Marcus set his phone down and took a deep breath of the night air. He dealt with unstable patients in the ER who were easier to reason with than Barbara Whitfield. As he contemplated his next move, he didn't realize that Barbara's environmental investigation was just the opening salvo in what would become known throughout Sunshine Acres as the pool incident of 2025. The real battle would begin at dawn. Marcus arrived home from his shift the next morning to find three separate official vehicles parked near his house: a county environmental services van, a utility truck, and most alarmingly, what appeared to be an animal control vehicle formed an impromptu blockade at the curb. He had barely stepped out of his car when Barbara emerged from behind the environmental services van like a general leading troops into battle. "There he is," she announced, pointing dramatically. The perpetrator himself. She was dressed in what could only be described as environmental activist cosplay, a hazmat suit several sizes too large, with the hood pushed back to reveal her signature blonde bob. Yellow rubber gloves extended past her elbows, and she carried a tablet with what appeared to be a homemade PowerPoint presentation visible on the screen. Marcus noticed a small crowd gathering on the sidewalk. Several neighbors had come out to witness the spectacle, some still in bathrobes clutching coffee mugs. He spotted Eleanor among them, her expression vacillating between concern and barely concealed exasperation. "Good morning," Marcus said wearily, addressing the assembled officials rather than Barbara. "Can someone please explain what's happening on my property?" A harried-looking woman in a county environmental services uniform stepped forward. "Sir, we received multiple urgent reports about a potential chemical spill and environmental hazard originating from your residence. The complainant," she glanced at Barbara, "has made some concerning claims about mutated wildlife and groundwater contamination." "I documented everything," Barbara interjected, waving her tablet. "3 frogs with 5 legs in the storm drain. A squirrel with a bald patch. Mrs. Peterson's tomatoes grow into abnormal sizes." The environmental officer maintained her professional demeanor with visible effort. "We're required to investigate all reports, but preliminary tests show no evidence of chemical leakage or contamination." "You're not testing deep enough," Barbara insisted. "The toxins sink to the bottom. I brought my own testing equipment." "Ma'am, we discussed this," the officer cut in. "Your pool test strips from the hardware store aren't calibrated for environmental assessment." The animal control officer, a younger man with an expression suggesting he'd rather be handling an angry raccoon than this situation, cleared his throat. "About the wildlife reports, the frog with extra appendages was actually a tadpole in normal development stage, and squirrels commonly experience hair loss during seasonal changes." "And my tomatoes always grow that big," called out an elderly woman from the gathering crowd, presumably Mrs. Peterson. "It's my grandmother's fertilizer recipe." Barbara's face reddened beneath her oversized hazmat hood. "You're all covering for him. There's a conspiracy here." Marcus noticed Sophie watching wide-eyed from their front window, where his neighbor Mrs. Chen was keeping an eye on her until he got home. He needed to end this circus quickly. "Officers," he said calmly, "I appreciate you responding to these concerns. I'm a healthcare professional who understands the importance of safety protocols. My pool was professionally installed with all required permits and meets all county regulations. I'd be happy to provide documentation again and grant you access to conduct any tests you deem necessary." The utility worker, who had remained silent until now, stepped forward. "Sir, we also received a report about unauthorized water usage and possible illegal connection to the municipal supply." "That's right." Barbara jumped in. "His water bill is suspiciously low for someone with a pool this size." Marcus couldn't help but smile slightly. "That would be because I installed a rainwater collection system that supplements the pool. It's registered with the County Water Conservation Program. I received a rebate for it last month." The utility worker nodded, making a note. "That explains it. The system is showing up correctly in our records." No. Barbara's voice rose to a pitch that made several neighbors wince. "You're not listening. There's clearly something wrong here. Why would someone go to such lengths to build a pool unless they were hiding something?" "Because my daughter loves swimming," Marcus answered simply. "And after her mother passed away 2 years ago, I promised her a pool in our new home." A hush fell over the gathering. Even Barbara seemed momentarily at a loss for words. The environmental officer cleared her throat. "Well, sir, if you don't mind, we'll just take a few routine samples to complete our report, and then we'll be on our way." "Of course," Marcus agreed. As the officials moved toward his backyard, Barbara suddenly rushed past them, her oversized hazmat suit rustling loudly. "I'll show you where to find the evidence," she called out, moving with surprising speed for someone in rubber boots 3 sizes too large. Marcus followed quickly, a sense of foreboding washing over him. He rounded the corner of his house just in time to see Barbara reach his pool area, where she stopped so abruptly that her hazmat hood flew forward over her face. The pool was surrounded by yellow caution tape. Standing beside it was Eleanor, alongside a stern-looking woman in a business suit holding an official-looking folder. "Barbara Whitfield?" the suited woman inquired. Barbara pushed her hood back, blinking in confusion. "Yes. Who are you? Claudia Martinez, County Legal Department, the woman replied, extending an envelope. This is a cease and desist order regarding your harassment of Mr. Delgado and other residents of Sunshine Acres. Additionally, I have documentation of the false reports you filed with various county agencies, which constitute misuse of emergency services. Barbara's mouth opened and closed several times without producing sound, a sight that reminded Marcus of the goldfish tank in his hospital's pediatric ward. This is outrageous. Barbara finally sputtered. I'm performing a public service. The community needs to be protected from. From what exactly? Eleanor interrupted, her patience clearly exhausted. Marcus has broken no rules. His pool has passed every inspection. The board unanimously voted last night to issue a formal reprimand for your actions. The county officials whom had caught up to the scene exchanged uncomfortable glances. So there's no actual environmental emergency? The environmental officer asked. None whatsoever, Eleanor confirmed. Just a clear case of harassment that has now escalated to the point of legal intervention. Barbara's face contorted with fury as she looked from Eleanor to the legal representative to Marcus. This isn't over. You think you can silence me with some paperwork? I have rights. Yes, you do, Claudia Martinez agreed calmly. And so do your neighbors, including the right not to be subjected to unfounded accusations and middle-of-the-night trespassing. As the significance of her situation began to dawn on her, Barbara took a step backward, then another. The county officials, sensing the shift in power dynamics, began to retreat toward their vehicles. We'll still need to file reports about the false complaints, the environmental officer told Marcus apologetically. But there won't be any further action required on your part. Marcus nodded gratefully. As the officials departed, leaving just the neighbors, Eleanor, and the legal representative, Barbara remained frozen in place, her oversized hazmat suit making her look suddenly deflated. This is a warning, Mrs. Whitfield, Claudia Martinez said firmly. Any further harassment will result in more severe legal consequences. With that final statement hanging in the air, Barbara turned and began walking stiffly toward her house, the sound of her rubber boots squelching with each step, the only noise in the otherwise silent yard. As the neighbors dispersed, Eleanor approached Marcus with a sympathetic smile. I'm sorry it had to come to this. We thought the cease and desist would be enough to put an end to the situation. Thank you for your help, Marcus replied sincerely. I hope this is the end of it. Eleanor's expression turned doubtful. I've known Barbara for 7 years. She doesn't give up easily, especially when she feels publicly humiliated. As if on cue, a crash sounded from the direction of Barbara's house, followed by the unmistakable sound of a car engine revving. What was that? Marcus asked, turning toward the noise. Eleanor's eyes widened. That doesn't sound good. They hurried toward the front of the house just in time to see Barbara's SUV backing out of her driveway at an alarming speed, the hazmat suit still visible through the windshield. Where is she going in such a hurry? Marcus wondered aloud. His question was answered moments later when Barbara's vehicle screeched to a halt in front of his house. She emerged clutching something large and metallic that glinted in the morning sunlight. Is that a? Eleanor began. Garden shears, Marcus confirmed, his stomach dropping. Really big ones. As Barbara charged toward his backyard, her hazmat hood flapping behind her like a cape, Marcus reached for his phone and dialed 911. Marcus spoke quickly but clearly into his phone as he ran after Barbara. There's a woman with garden shears attempting to vandalize my property at 226 Maple Avenue in Sunshine Acres. She's been served with a cease and desist order today and appears to be having some kind of breakdown. The dispatcher's voice remained calm. Officers are being dispatched. Are you in a safe location? I'm following her to my backyard. She's heading for my swimming pool. Sir, I recommend you maintain a safe distance until officers arrive. I understand, Marcus replied, though he continued moving forward. Through the phone, he could hear the dispatcher relaying information to responding units, including a concerning detail that made his pulse quicken. Possible EDP with large cutting implement. Emotionally disturbed person. As an ER nurse, Marcus was all too familiar with the code. He rounded the corner of his house just in time to see Barbara standing at the edge of his pool, the garden shears raised dramatically above her head. She had discarded the hazmat suit top, but still wore the oversized rubber boots and gloves, giving her the appearance of a deranged gardener. Barbara, Marcus called out calmly, keeping a safe distance. You need to put down the shears. Barbara's head snapped toward him, her eyes wild. This ends now. If the authorities won't protect this neighborhood, I'll do it myself. Eleanor appeared beside Marcus, slightly out of breath. Barbara, think about what you're doing. This is criminal damage to property. You'll be arrested. It'll be worth it, Barbara declared. I've documented everything. The chemicals, the noise, the excessive water usage. When the truth finally comes out, I'll be vindicated. Marcus took a cautious step forward, hands raised to show he wasn't a threat. "Barbara, I understand you believe you're doing the right thing, but this isn't the way to handle concerns. If you damage my pool, it won't solve anything and you'll be facing serious legal consequences. Don't try reason with me." Barbara shot back, waving the shears for emphasis. "I've been watching this neighborhood decline ever since people like you started moving in with your pools and your trampolines and your basketball hoops." "People like me?" Marcus asked, his voice still measured despite the implication. "People who don't respect the aesthetic integrity of Sunshine Acres." Barbara's voice cracked with emotion. "Do you know how many hours I spent on the landscaping committee? How many petunias I planted along the community entrance? I was Yard of the Month for 17 consecutive months before the committee was restructured." The pieces suddenly clicked into place for Marcus. This wasn't about his pool at all. "This is about you losing control," he said quietly. "You used to have authority in the neighborhood, and now you don't." Barbara's expression flickered briefly, a hint of vulnerability showing through the rage. Then her face hardened again. "You don't understand anything," she hissed. "This pool is just a symptom of the larger problem, and sometimes you have to cut out the infection to save the patient." With that declaration, she turned back to the pool and plunged the garden shears straight down, not into the water, but directly into the pool liner at the shallow end, just above the waterline. "No!" Marcus shouted, rushing forward as water began spraying from the puncture. Barbara yanked the shears free and moved to create another hole, but the first puncture had unexpected consequences. The jet of water struck her directly in the face, momentarily blinding her. She staggered backward, slipping on the wet concrete in her oversized rubber boots. Her arms windmilled frantically as she fought for balance, the garden shears flying from her hand and clattering onto the pool deck. Before Marcus could reach her, Barbara's feet went out from under her completely. She landed hard on her backside and continued sliding toward the pool's edge, a look of horrified realization dawning on her face just before she tumbled unceremoniously into the deep end with a tremendous splash. Eleanor gasped. "Oh my God. Can she swim?" Barbara resurfaced moments later, sputtering and flailing. "Help. I can't." She disappeared under the water briefly before bobbing up again. "Swim. I can't swim." Without hesitation, Marcus kicked off his shoes and dove into the pool. With efficient strokes, he reached Barbara in seconds, securing an arm around her as she thrashed in panic. "Stop fighting," he commanded in the authoritative voice he reserved for emergency room chaos. "I've got you. You're safe." Something in his tone penetrated Barbara's panic, and she stopped struggling long enough for Marcus to guide her to the pool steps. As they reached the shallow end, the sound of sirens filled the air, growing steadily louder. Marcus helped Barbara sit on the top step, where the water barely reached her waist. She coughed and gasped, mascara running down her face in black rivulets. Her blonde bob hung in soggy clumps around her face, and her designer polo shirt clung to her like a second skin. "You," she wheezed between coughs, "saved me." "Of course I did," Marcus replied simply. "It's what I do." Barbara stared at him, genuine confusion replacing the previous hostility in her eyes. "But I was trying to destroy your pool. And I'm an ER nurse who took an oath to help people," Marcus said with a shrug. "Even difficult ones." Two police officers appeared at the back gate, hands on their holsters as they assessed the scene. Behind them stood Claudia Martinez from the county legal department, her expression a mixture of shock and resignation. "Is everyone all right?" one officer called out. "Medically, yes," Marcus answered, "though we have some property damage and a person who may need psychological evaluation." As Marcus helped Barbara out of the pool, she seemed smaller somehow, the fury and self-righteousness having drained away with the pool water that continued to spurt from the puncture in the liner. "I don't understand," she mumbled, more to herself than anyone else. "You should hate me." Marcus sighed as he handed her a towel from the nearby rack. "I don't hate you, Barbara. I think you're someone who's struggling with changes you can't control, and it's manifesting in increasingly destructive ways." The officers approached cautiously, one of them retrieving the discarded garden shears while the other began taking statements from Eleanor and Claudia Martinez. From inside the house, Marcus could see Sophie watching through the window, Mrs. Chen's arm protectively around her shoulders. "Mrs. Whitfield," the first officer said, "we need to discuss what happened here. There are witnesses who saw you damage Mr. Delgado's property, and there's a cease and desist order that you appear to have violated." Barbara nodded numbly, the fight completely gone from her. "I know." "I'd like to hear the 911 call," Claudia Martinez interjected, approaching Marcus. "It will be important for the legal proceedings." The officer nodded and used his radio to request that the recording be sent to Martinez's official email. Within minutes, her phone chimed with a notification. "Let's listen to it now," she suggested, setting her phone to speaker mode. The recording began with the dispatcher's standard greeting. followed by Marcus' a calm, professional description of the situation. As Barbara listened to Marcus's measured tone, no hysterics, no exaggerations, just facts delivered clearly even in a crisis, her expression shifted from resignation to something approaching shame. But it was what came next in the recording that caused everyone to fall silent. "Sir, can you describe the woman's appearance and current actions?" the dispatcher asked. "She's a middle-aged woman, blonde hair, currently wearing rubber boots and gloves." Marcus' recorded voice replied. "She appears to be in psychological distress. I believe she may need medical assistance as well as police intervention. She's not a criminal. She's someone in crisis who needs help." Barbara's head snapped up, her red-rimmed eyes wide with disbelief. "You said that? About me? After everything I did?" Marcus shrugged. "It's true, isn't it? You're not well, Barbara. This isn't normal behavior, even for someone who's upset about neighborhood changes." Barbara's lower lip trembled as the officers approached her. "Mrs. Whitfield, we need you to come with us. You're being detained for criminal damage to property and violation of a legal order." As they gently took her by the arms, Barbara looked back at Marcus. "I'm sorry," she whispered, the words clearly unfamiliar to her tongue. "About your pool and everything else." Marcus nodded acknowledgement as the officers led Barbara away. Claudia Martinez stayed behind, surveying the damage. "The pool can be repaired," Marcus told her, watching the water level slowly dropping. "I'm more concerned about her. Will there be a psychological evaluation?" "Given the circumstances and your 911 call specifically requesting it, yes," Martinez confirmed. "The court will likely mandate therapy as part of any plea agreement." She glanced at her notes. "The judge assigned to these cases is big on rehabilitation over